Please remain seated. The show will begin in 3, 2...
Like a Hellcat! For more awesome content, like and subscribe now.
It was a bleak and cloudy afternoon, approaching sundown on a Saturday. I had just left the local bakery in the city, the streets of Japan heavily crowded with people that shopped and chatted amongst themselves. I made my way to the subway station and realized I had missed my chance to get home. I then remembered a longer route, which required me to walk through the desolate dark woods, and so I proceeded onward, treading the rocky terrain. Equipped with a flashlight, I carefully scanned my surroundings, and after an hour of walking, I had accidentally stumbled and slipped, sliding down the steep hill and landed in an unfamiliar place. I found myself at a train yard. The railway was rusted and withered with age and decay, and as were the various scraps of what remained of trains, which were hardly intact. The station had busted up windows and chipped paint. There was also an overgrowth of vegetation, and the wind seemed to whistle through the cracks of the ruins, and seemed to carry an eerie tone of melancholy. I took out my camera and snapped some pictures. I didn't know much then what I know now, but I wasn't very familiar with that area and the story behind it. Japan is full of many wonders, both oftentimes odd and fascinating, and a few that are so morbidly disturbing that therefore even speaking of one of them out loud to another soul will bring nothing but misery and misfortune to the teller of the tale. I explored inside a couple of the train cars before deciding to check out the station. It was then pitch black out, and I kept to myself in the nearby warehouse, sheltered from the heavy rain that downpoured. A single lit candle gave me a source of light, as I read my book and had a bite to eat. You may be wondering why I didn't just leave and head on back to the apartment. Well, as much as the rain brought some soothing comfort, I didn't bring an umbrella nor had a coat on, so I figured I'd wait for the rain to pass. There was a window close to me where I sat that had a gray curtain with a few holes and had been falling apart. I flipped through one page to the next, my eyes glued to the contents of the book, as I was engrossed in what I was reading. After a while, 9 o'clock arrived, and I had dozed off, my face flat on the wood table as my book lay beside me. Then, all of a sudden, I was awoken by something peculiar. It was some distance away, but I could still make it out. It was like a tech-tech sound. It startled me, but I had no clue what the source was, and maybe it would stop at some point. But it didn't. The noise got louder and louder, and as I listened, I quietly hid underneath the desk after blowing out the candle. I silenced my breathing and I didn't move a muscle, didn't dare utter a sound, and the noise grew closer and closer to me. Tech, 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 and again, tech, 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 tech. I shut my eyes and the noise stopped when it reached the door of the warehouse. Then, as lightning flashed, the window that was covered by the curtain showed the silhouette of a person looking in. I ducked and crawled up to a loft away from the door. I then ascended the ladder and pulled it up and hid behind a huge crate. Then I heard something like nails on a chalkboard, the scraping sound travel along the door and the walls. There was also this animalistic breathing, and again I heard it, and it was ear-splitting torture. It pounded in my ears. Tech, 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 tech. The noise had stopped once more, and whatever it was had left. I then jumped down and peered out the window behind the curtain to see nothing but the rain still downpouring. I sighed in relief, scratching my head to make sense of what just happened. But due to my previous experiences, I realized that when it came to the paranormal and yokais, all logic and rationality was completely non-existent. I then grabbed my stuff and decided to just walk home. I exited the warehouse and ran until I felt my legs were numb. I was on the other end of the train yard and the exit itself was 70 yards away. I looked around me and my eyes caught a glimpse of something zoom past 2 rotting train cars. I squinted for a moment, unable to make out a shape. I was tired, and for once I just wanted to convince my senses that it was just a figment of my imagination. I continued walking and then heard footsteps approaching maybe 5 feet from me in the darkness. I had begun to panic, so I bolted and the footsteps tailed me as I made it halfway. And then I was struck in the back of the head and I blacked out. Several minutes later, I woke up with blurry vision, and I groaned in pain, blood trickling on the side of my head, as it took me a little bit to be able to come to. I looked around me to see that my ankles and wrists were bounded by rope. I then heard footsteps again, and stepping out of the shadows was a hooded figure in a gray jacket, and then they walked over to me and hovered over me. "Ugh, who are you?" I managed to say weakly. "What do you want from me?" The figure then lifted the hood off their head, and my jaw dropped as their face was revealed. Kenji? Kenji looked down at me and held his hands up. "In the flesh," he said with a sheepish grin. "How are you here?" I demanded. "Suki told me you were—" I was then cut off by chilling laughter emitting from the shadows as another person came into view. "Suki? Oh, what's the matter, bestie?" chimed Suki sadistically as she stood beside her boyfriend and eyed me intensely. "You look like you've seen a obaku." I was astounded. "What is all this?" I asked. "Why am I tied up?" Suki sighed, giving a coy smile as her and Kenji's eyes locked briefly, before she leaned down slightly. "What can I say?" she chirped. "You were so gullible. You fell right into my trap. You should know the reason is quite obvious, Aaron-san. You have done nothing but watch me struggle as I was mocked and ridiculed by everyone for 12 miserable years. You said you were my friend, but what kind of friend would stay silent while I was tortured in school as awful rumors were spread about me, how I was beaten and humiliated day in and day out? You neglected me back in the States. You dismissed me for your new so-called pals. Like I said before, you always had it all. The looks, the success, the family that supports you, the bright future ahead." She paced around me as she had her rant. "And me? What did I get? Always the short end of the stick, living in your shadow, and then after 4 years of silence, after you graduating college as valedictorian, you reach out to me again, and you want to rekindle what was lost between us. A little late for apologies now, isn't it, Aaron-san?" "Aaron, I'm sorry, but I never stopped caring. I was just so focused on my career and us going in different directions that I was just trying to prioritize what was important." "Oh," she said, "I wasn't important enough to you? I spent years making sacrifices for you since we were kids, and you left me behind to rot. I was the one who took care of you when you needed someone, when you were at your lowest and failed in your studies. I gave up sleep to help you pass every exam. And then, right when I needed you most, you abandoned me for the ones who caused me so much pain. You did nothing but betray me, Aaron-san." "But I saved you from Hanako's spirit in the bathroom, didn't I? Does that not mean something to you? And why did you help Kenji stage his death? He's an ass to you, and he's cheated on you multiple times." "All that means is that you were foolish enough to allow me to live still, knowing that you would be as well. And I was so close to ending it all. My suffering. I would have given anything to die that night. But no, you had to get in the way, like always. Why, Hanako didn't choose you and see you as unworthy to breathe at all is beyond me. And I love Kenji, and he told me the truth about how you tried stealing him from me for months. Are you high? I responded. I never was interested in him that way. Quite frankly, he's not even interesting enough to make me vomit. Suki huffed, rolling her eyes annoyed. Don't bullshit me, she snapped. He's told me plenty of stories of how you tried to seduce him and then plotted to get rid of me. And you believe him? The guy can't even hold down a job, and he's got as much personality as a dumb rock. You really think I'd give up an ounce of my self-respect for that pathetic excuse of a man whose only accomplishment in life was being the boy toy of every rich girl who saw him as a tool? You're delusional if you think you're actually something special to him. Suki's left eye twitched and she let out a low growl. Well, Aaron-san, she chimes. You are now the bait. Trapped in the lion's den, and there's no escape for you. You know where you are. This is the domain of the Yokai Teke. Remember? Remember how Kashima Reiko, that poor, fragile schoolgirl, had fallen onto train tracks and was dragged, ran over by the train that sliced her in half as she was left to die in the bitter cold? You know, I neglected to mention she likes to play with her victims before they die. But eating them is her favorite thing. Human blood and flesh are such divine delicacies for savage, ugly beasts like her. So you're gonna be a petty bitch and have me killed? You don't think I didn't try to be a good friend to you? I'm not perfect, Suki. I made some mistakes, I'll admit that. But I tried to be there. If you had the courage to open up to me, I would have done something. But you shut me out. You gave up on yourself, got hooked on drugs. You were in a downward spiral, and you were in so deep that I knew that it was too late to save you. I reached out many times the last 4 years while at university, and you never even answered my other emails. It wasn't until after I graduated that you messaged me back. What other emails? Suki spat. I never got one, not even a single phone call. Well, I did write and call all the time, Suki. I just figured you were ignoring me. Suki then turned to Kenji. Whenever I asked you who called or emailed me, you told me it was nothing, she said. Kenji, did you lie to me? Of course not. She's obviously lying, said Kenji, shooting a glare at me. Suki, we've known each other longer, I argued. You have to believe me. Suki then violently kicked me in the stomach and I yelped. Shut up, she yelled. Now I can finally be free from the torment and the misery I had to endure. With you dead, I can move on and be happy. Then all of a sudden, we all heard... Tech, 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 tech. Suki, we have to go, whispered Kenji. Suki nodded, and they both ran the opposite direction. I struggled to break loose from the binds as the sound drew closer to me. Then it stopped. I then found a glass shard beside me and picked it up with my feet before lifting them slightly and carefully cutting through the rope. Once my feet were freed, I did my wrists. I then got up and turned to hightail it to the other exit. But then as I leaped onto the platform, a fog rolled in, and I heard the tech-tech sound once more. I was paralyzed with fear as someone else emerged from underneath one of the train cars. I couldn't make out their shape at first, but then as the fog cleared, I was able to get a closer look. The figure was a younger female, probably 17 or 18 years old. She wore a school uniform blouse as well as a brown buttoned-up jacket, and she had long black hair drooped over her face. My eyes widened in horror as I noticed that she was holding herself up with her hands, and in her right hand she held a scythe. Then I could hear the creaking of the bones in her neck as she looked up at me. I felt sick, as I could see her spine sticking out from where her lower torso should have been. She had no legs. She was leaving a blood trail as she crawled and reached towards me. Oh my god, I thought. I muttered the words Kashima Reiko under my breath. I then fucking bolted and I jumped over a huge object in my path as the blade of her scythe swung, missing my skin by a good 5 inches. She was chasing me and I desperately ran like an insane person, jumping as high as I could to avoid the sharp blade that swiped at me repeatedly. The legless figure was attempting to slice me in half. She was fast. I had to be faster. I slid underneath a metal table and made a beeline for the exit. I managed to escape the train yard and saw a car up ahead. I recognized the license plate. It was Suki's car and the driver's side door was open. Why him and Suki hadn't drove off in it didn't make any sense until I realized upon seeing the keys that were left in the ignition that the car was out of gas as I turned it on. Being a mechanic and a quick thinker, I had the advantage to jumpstart the vehicle by hot wiring it. I then drove halfway down the dirt road on a steep hill, and before I could reach the bridge, one of the tires popped off and I skidded, crashing into a huge rock. I banged up my face pretty badly as I hit the steering wheel. My nose was bleeding and I staggered out of the car, nearly collapsing to the ground in exhaustion. I then heard the cock of a pistol. I then looked up to see Suki hold a gun to my face. "Kenji, grab her," she barked. Kenji pulled me up by the hair and yanked me as we walked to the center of the bridge. He leaned me over the tall bridge and I could see a 50-foot drop with sharp, jagged rocks in the shallow water. "Suki, please, let's talk this out," I begged. Suki hums casually. "You want to bury the hatchet?" she chimes, then pulling one out, and added sadistically, "Does your skull count?" Suki ushered for Kenji to have me kneel, and I was forced to obey. "Bow your head," she told me. I did. "Any last words?" she asked me as Kenji stood by the car. Before I could say anything else, I heard, "Tech, tech, 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 tech," and then wailing and hearing Kenji scream, and then flesh tearing. I was shocked to see the infamous yokai Teke Teke, aka Kashima Reiko, eat away Kenji's face and eyes, then rip out his lungs with her teeth. Suki didn't move either. She was crying petrified, still had the hatchet raised. This was my chance. I ran to the other side of the bridge, and Suki slipped in the wet mud, and the hatchet flew over the bridge, landing in the water. She then yelled, looking at me, "Aaron-san, help me!" I chose to do nothing at that moment, but watch as Teke Teke inched closer to Suki that desperately tried to get away. It felt wrong, but right at the same time, seeing her grovel and beg and ask for my help despite the fact she tried to have me killed at the train yard, and when that failed, she tried to behead me. But I couldn't stoop so low. She may have deserved death for what she had done, but I couldn't bring myself to leave her. However, I should have, because as soon as I approached her, she tackled me to the ground and tried to strangle me. It didn't last long, as she had gasped. The blade of the scythe had cut through, splitting Suki in half, from her chest to her cranium. Blood splatter, guts, intestines, her two halves now lying in a huge crimson puddle. And I scurried, trying to scramble to my feet, but a bony claw gripped my left ankle and pulled me down. Teke Teke leaned in close to me, her breath foul, as she asked, in a gravelly voice, "Do you need your legs?" I then remembered what to say. "I need them now," I said. Then she asked, "Where are mine?" I then said, "The Mishin Railway." Final question. "Who told you this?" I stammered, "Masked Death Demon." She backed away slowly and then told me, "Share my story with another person, and you shall live." I vowed to do so. Then, as quick as a flash, she was gone. I bolted 3 miles back to the city, and I still remain in Japan now. Despite my horrible experiences close to death, I have grown fond of the culture and the people there. I've learned to appreciate life more. And this story, I hope, teaches you to be overly cautious, because it is better to be scared so you're prepared. If you're not, you just might become a victim yourself.